They laughed as they tossed that rusty key at my face, convinced they were scrubbing their perfect lives clean of a mistake by gifting me a needle-infested wasteland. They had no idea that beneath the cracked concrete slept an economic dragon worth over $2 billion. When I woke it up, I didn't just reclaim my dignity, I bought their arrogance just to crush it. This isn't a story about real estate. It is a death sentence for greed. My name is Gretchen Alderney. I am 28 years old, and despite being a senior logistics engineer for Apex Logistics, capable of coordinating the movement of thousands of tons of freight across the Pacific Ocean, I still found myself sitting in my car at the bottom of my parents' driveway, hyperventilating. The driveway itself was a quarter of a mile of paved arrogance, winding through manicured hedges that likely cost more to maintain annually than my entire college tuition. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My blazer was practical, charcoal gray, and lint-free. It was the armor of a woman who worked for a living. It was also, I knew, completely unacceptable attire for the Alderney estate. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old leather and stale coffee inside my sensible sedan, and forced myself to open the door. The gravel crunched under my boots, a sound that felt deafening in the oppressive silence of the estate. Tonight was my parents' joint birthday celebration. It was a mandatory summons. To refuse would be to declare war, and I was not ready for war. Not yet. When I entered the dining room, the atmosphere was already thick enough to choke on. The chandelier above the table was a monstrosity of crystal that looked like a frozen explosion. Casting a harsh, fracturing light over the dinner service, my mother, Evelyn, was adjusting a napkin ring with the precision of a surgeon. She did not look up when I walked in. "You are late, Gretchen," she said to the napkin. 7 minutes late. Traffic coming out of the distribution center was bad. "Mother," I replied, taking my seat, or rather, taking the seat assigned to me. The long mahogany table was set for 4. My father, Richard, sat at the head, a king in his own mind, swirling a glass of amber scotch that was likely older than I was. To his right, in the seat of honor, sat my sister, Tiffany, and there I was, placed at the far end, to the left, dangerously close to the swinging door that led to the kitchen. Every time the hired servers entered or exited, I would get a waft of steam and the clatter of pans. It was a subtle geography of affection. Tiffany was in the light. I was in the service corridor. Tiffany was 30 years old and glowed with the artificial luminance of a woman who had never worked a physical day in her life. She was wearing a dress that probably cost $6,000, a shimmering silver thing that made her look like a disco ball wrapped in silk. She was currently holding her phone up, finding the perfect angle for a selfie with her wine glass. "Hey, Gretch," Tiffany said, not looking away from her screen. "You look tired. Is that a new wrinkle on your forehead? I have a dermatologist who could blast that off for you, friends and family discount." "I am fine. Tiffany," I said, unfolding my napkin. "Some of us have deadlines, not just spa appointments." "Play nice," my father grumbled, finally acknowledging my existence. He looked at me with eyes that were glazed over with indifference. "We have an announcement to make tonight. Do not ruin the mood with your shop talk. Gretchen, nobody cares about shipping containers." The dinner was a masterclass in passive-aggressive torture. The first course was a cold cucumber soup that tasted like watery resentment. While we ate, Tiffany dominated the conversation with tales of her latest struggles, how hard it was to find a personal trainer who understood her specific chakras, and the absolute tragedy of her favorite sushi restaurant losing its Michelin star. My parents listened with rapt attention, nodding and making sympathetic noises as if she were describing a tour of duty in a war zone. Whenever I tried to speak, to mention the promotion I was up for at Apex, or the complex supply chain problem I had solved regarding a shipment of medical supplies to Alaska, the air in the room would vanish. My mother would suddenly find a fascinating flaw in the tablecloth, or my father would signal for more wine. I was static noise. I was the glitch in their perfect broadcast. Finally, after the main course of dry roast beef had been cleared away, my father stood up, He buttoned his jacket, a signal that business was about to be conducted. He cleared his throat, a wet, rattling sound that demanded silence. "Your mother and I have been doing some thinking," he began, looking strictly at Tiffany. "We are not getting any younger. We want to spend our golden years traveling, enjoying the fruits of my labor without the burden of managing all our assets. We have decided to distribute a significant portion of your inheritance early, to help you settle down, to ensure the Alderney legacy is secure." Tiffany gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in a performance of surprise that would not have fooled a toddler. She knew. Of course she knew. They probably rehearsed this over brunch while I was at work. My father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a velvet box. He slid it across the mahogany table toward Tiffany. It moved smoothly, like a curling stone on ice. "Tiffany," he said, his voice trembling with a pride he never showed me, "you are the face of this family. You have the grace, the social standing, and the charm that defines us. We want you to have the Sapphire Coast Villa in Malibu." The room went silent. $5 million. That property was the crown jewel of the family real estate portfolio. It sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, a glass and steel architectural marvel that had been featured in magazines. Tiffany squealed, a high-pitched sound that grated against my eardrums. She opened the box to reveal a gleaming, silver key. "Oh, Daddy, Mommy, I don't even know what to say. I'm going to turn the pool house into a yoga studio. It is going to be perfect for my brand." "It is yours, sweetheart." My mother beamed, tears of joy welling in her eyes. "You deserve it. You are the only one who could truly appreciate such beauty." Then, the room turned cold. The warmth that had been directed at Tiffany evaporated instantly as 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My father did not reach into his pocket for a velvet box. Instead, he reached down to the floor beside his chair and picked up a thick manila envelope. It was wrinkled at the corners. There was a coffee stain on the flap. He did not slide it. He tossed it. The envelope hit the table with a flat slap and skidded a few inches before stopping near the butter dish. It looked like trash. It looked like an afterthought. "And for you, Gretchen," my father said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all its warmth. "We know you are different. You like to get your hands dirty. You are practical." I stared at the envelope. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a painful, rhythmic thud. I reached out, my hand steady despite the rage boiling in my veins, and opened the clasp. Inside was a deed. I pulled it out. The paper was yellowed, the typewritten font fading. Deed of ownership. Lot 49, Industrial Sector 4, Seattle, Washington. I knew this place. I had seen the files in my father's office years ago. It was a joke. It was a desolate square of concrete wedged between 2 condemned warehouses on the outskirts of the city, right near the port. It was surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence topped with razor wire that had long since collapsed. It was a dumping ground for illegal garbage and a haven for drug users. It was valued at next to nothing on the tax books because of the cleanup costs required to make it usable. "A parking lot?" I asked, my voice flat. "It is a piece of land." "Gretchen," my mother snapped, her eyes narrowing. "Do not be ungrateful. Land is a solid asset." "It is a hazardous waste site, Mother," I corrected her. "It is an empty slab of concrete in the middle of an industrial dead zone." "Well," Tiffany giggled, clutching her Malibu key to her chest, "if you ever lose that little job of yours at the shipping company, at least you will have a place to pitch a tent. You used to love camping when you were a Girl Scout, right? It suits you." My mother let out a short, sharp laugh. "That is true. You always were the rugged type, Gretchen. Maybe you can charge people to park their bicycles there. Make a few quarters." My father smirked, leaning back in his chair, looking satisfied with his cruelty. "We thought it matched your ambition. Gretchen, it is utilitarian, just like you." The air left the room. For a moment, I was 8 years old again, waiting on the curb at school for 3 hours because they forgot to pick me up. only to find out they had taken Tiffany to get ice cream and lost track of time. I was 16, holding my straight-A report card, while they ignored me to praise Tiffany for getting a participation trophy in a beauty pageant. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to scream, to throw a tantrum, to prove that I was the unstable, difficult child they always painted me to be. They wanted to validate their decision to cast me aside. I looked at the deed in my hand. Lot 49, a wasteland, a burden. But then, my engineer's brain flickered. I thought about the location. Sector 4, the port, the congestion problems I dealt with every day at Apex Logistics, the impossible traffic jams the trucks faced. I looked at the map attached to the deed. I slowly folded the paper and placed it back into the envelope. I did not cry. I did not scream. I stood up, smoothing out the wrinkles in my charcoal blazer. I picked up the envelope and tucked it under my arm. "Thank you," I said. My voice was ice. It was colder than the soup, colder than the look in my father's eyes. "Thank you," Tiffany asked, blinking her false eyelashes. "For a pile of dirt." "Thank you," I repeated, looking directly at my father, then my mother. "For finally showing me the true value of family. You have made everything perfectly clear tonight. I appreciate the clarity." "Don't be dramatic, Gretchen," my mother sighed, waving a hand dismissively. "Sit down and finish your wine." "I am full," I said. "Enjoy Malibu. Tiffany, I hope the foundation is solid." I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Tiffany snort. "God, she is so intense. It is just a parking lot. Gretchen, lighten up." My father chuckled. "Let her go. She will be back when the tax bill comes due, begging for a loan." Their laughter followed me out of the dining room, echoing off the marble floors of the foyer. It sounded distinct, sharp, and predatory. They were vultures picking at what they thought was a carcass. I pushed open the heavy front door and stepped out into the cool night air. The gravel crunched under my boots again, but this time, the sound was different. It wasn't the sound of hesitation, it was the sound of traction. I got into my car and threw the envelope onto the passenger seat. I started the engine and drove down the winding driveway. Leaving the lights of the mansion in my rearview mirror, I did not look back. I did not feel sad. The heat of anger that had threatened to consume me earlier had cooled into something else entirely. It had hardened into a solid, unbreakable resolve. They thought they had given me nothing. They thought they had given me a joke. But as I merged onto the highway, heading toward the dark, industrial skyline of Seattle, I realized they were wrong. They had freed me. They had cut the last cord that tethered me to their approval. I looked at the envelope on the seat next to me. Lot 49. "Okay," I whispered to the empty car. "Let's see what you are made of." The reality of my inheritance hit me not with a bang, but with the wet, sickening crunch of a used hypodermic needle snapping under the sole of my work boot. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sky over Seattle was the color of a bruised plum, hanging low and heavy with the threat of rain. I stood in the center of Lot 49, breathing an air that tasted of diesel exhaust, rotting cardboard, and sea salt. My father had called it a parking lot. That was a generous euphemism. It was a graveyard for the city's refuse, a quarter-acre of cracked asphalt, trapped between two hulking, windowless warehouses that looked like they had been abandoned since the Cold War. I surveyed my kingdom. To my left, a mountain of black garbage bags had been torn open by seagulls, spilling coffee grounds and unidentifiable sludge onto the ground. To my right, the chain-link fence was more whole than metal, curling inward like a dead spider. In the far corner, a rusted sedan sat on cinder blocks, stripped of its tires and dignity. This was what my parents thought I was worth. This was the physical manifestation of my place in the Alderney family tree. I wanted to scream. I wanted to get back in my car, drive to Malibu, and set fire to Tiffany's pergola. But I did not. I was an engineer. I dealt in logistics, in structural integrity, in problem solving. Emotion was just variables you could not control. So I pushed it down until it was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I walked the perimeter. It took me exactly 4 minutes. The ground was uneven. The concrete buckled by tree roots and neglect. But as I stood near the back fence, pulling a piece of stray rebar out of the dirt, I felt the ground vibrate. It was a low, rhythmic thrumming that traveled up through the soles of my boots. I looked up. Beyond the collapsed fence was a narrow access road that fed directly into the main artery of the Port of Seattle. I watched as an 18-wheeler, a massive red beast hauling a 40-foot container, tried to navigate the sharp turn onto the highway. The driver was struggling. The turn was too tight. He had to back up, pull forward, back up again, blocking traffic for 3 solid minutes. Horns blared. The driver looked exhausted. I checked my watch. 6:15. I stood there for an hour. In that 60 minutes, I watched 14 trucks struggle with that same turn. I saw 3 drivers pull over on the shoulder, risking a ticket, just to run into the bushes to relieve themselves because there were no facilities for miles. I saw a driver sleeping in his cab, the engine idling, parked dangerously close to moving traffic because the official port waiting lot was full. My father had told me to open a lemonade stand. He had laughed, but as I watched a weary driver rub his face with a greasy towel, I realized my father had made a critical error. He saw dirt. I saw a choke point. This was not a parking lot. It was a release valve for a high-pressure system. I drove straight to the bank. I emptied my savings account. It was not a fortune, just over $35,000 that I'd been saving for a down payment on a condo I would now never buy. It was terrifying to see the balance hit zero. But fear was useless. I needed more. I went to work at Apex Logistics and cornered Dave, a senior shift manager who had always respected my work. I asked for a personal loan of $10,000. He asked why. I told him I was investing in infrastructure. He laughed, but he wrote the check. The next 3 weeks were a blur of physical agony. I did not hire a crew for the cleanup. I could not afford one. I did it myself. I rented a dumpster and spent my evenings and weekends in a hazmat suit, shoveling decades of filth into the bin. My hands blistered and bled. My back ached so constantly that it became a background rhythm to my life. I learned to operate a bobcat loader from a YouTube tutorial to clear the heavier debris. I hauled away the rusted sedan piece by piece. When the lot was finally clear, it looked even more desolate, just a gray scar on the earth, but it was clean. I used the loan money to hire a paver. We laid down a fresh, thick coat of asphalt, smoothing over the cracks and the history of neglect. I installed a new fence, 8 feet high, topped with fresh razor wire that glinted silver under the streetlights. I installed high-intensity LED floodlights that turned the night into noon. Then came the amenities. I bought 2 refurbished shipping containers. One became the office, the other I retrofitted with 3 shower stalls and a row of heavy-duty coin-operated washing machines. I hooked up the plumbing myself, illegally tapping into the main line because the permit process would have taken 6 months. I named it Secure Transit Hub 49. I did not advertise. I simply walked over to the port entrance with a stack of flyers printed on neon yellow paper. Secure overnight parking, hot showers, 24-hour surveillance, $20 a night. The first night, nobody came. I sat in the container office, staring at the empty asphalt, listening to the rain drum against the metal roof. I wondered if my parents were right. I wondered if I was just a girl playing in the mud. Then, at 2 a.m, headlights swept across the lot. A long-haul truck, caked in road salt, rumbled through the gate. The driver climbed down. He was a giant of a man with a beard like steel wool. He looked at the fence, then at the lights, then at me. "Shower water actually hot?" he asked. His voice sounded like gravel in a mixer. "Scalding," I promised. He handed me a $20 bill. "I'll tell the boys on the radio." That was the beginning. The boys on the radio turned out to be the most effective marketing team in existence. Within a week, I was at 50% capacity. By the end of the month, I was turning trucks away. The drivers loved it. It was simple. It was safe. and I didn't treat them like nuisances. I learned their names. I kept a pot of strong coffee brewing in the office. Secure Transit Hub 49 wasn't making me a millionaire, but it was generating a steady, reliable stream of cash flow. It was honest money. It smelled like soap and diesel, and I loved it. While I was scraping gum off the shower tiles, my sister Tiffany was busy curating her life on social media. I checked her profile during my lunch breaks, a masochistic habit I could not break. Post number 1, Tiffany holding a glass of champagne on the balcony of the Malibu villa. Caption, living my best life. Ocean breezes and new beginnings. Post number 2, Tiffany posing with a contractor. Caption, renovations are so stressful, making this palace fit for a queen, but I knew how to read between the filters. In the background of the first photo, I saw the pool water was green with algae. In the second photo, the contractor looked less like a worker and more like a debt collector. I did the math in my head. The property taxes on a $5 million estate in Malibu were astronomical. The insurance for a cliffside property was even worse, and the maintenance salt air ate through everything. Tiffany had no income. My parents had given her the house, but they had not given her the liquidity to run it. She was bleeding money, and she was trying to hide the hemorrhage with Valencia filters. Then came the phone call. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the middle of fixing a jammed coin mechanism on one of the washing machines when my phone buzzed. Mother? I wiped the grease from my hands onto my jeans and answered. Hello, Mother? Gretchen, she said. Her voice was tight, the tone she used when she wanted something but hated having to ask. Are you busy? Your father and I were just discussing you. I am working, Mother, I said, wedging the phone between my shoulder and ear as I twisted a screwdriver. Working, she scoffed. You mean sitting in that booth watching cars park? Listen, Tiffany is in town for the weekend. She drove the Range Rover up from California, and the engine is making a dreadful noise, a clanking sound. She should take it to a mechanic, I said flatly. Don't be silly, my mother snapped. Mechanics are thieves. You know about engines. You were always tinkering with that junk in the garage when you were a teenager. We need you to come over to the estate and take a look at it. Tiffany has a gala to attend tonight, and she can't drive a rental. It would be embarrassing. I paused. The audacity was breathtaking. They had thrown me away, mocked my livelihood, and now they wanted free labor because they were too cheap to pay a professional. No, I said. Silence on the other end. Excuse me. No, I repeated, my voice calm. I am running a business. I do not have time to fix Tiffany's car. If she can afford a $5 million villa, she can afford a mechanic. How dare you? My mother hissed. After everything we have done for you, we gave you property. Gretchen, we gave you a start. You gave me a landfill, I corrected her. And now that landfill is busy. Goodbye, Mother. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally drawing a line in the sand. I went back to the washing machine. The coin mechanism clicked into place. Fixed. Later that evening, the rain stopped. I decided to do a perimeter check before the night shift rush began. I walked to the back of the lot, near the spot where the old sedan had been. The ground there was still uneven during the paving process. We had just gone over it, but a section of the new asphalt had sunken slightly, creating a small depression where water pooled. I frowned. Subsidence. That was not good. I went to the tool shed and grabbed a crowbar. I chipped away at the fresh asphalt, annoyed that I would have to patch it already. Beneath the blacktop, I hit something metal. It wasn't a rock. It rang like a bell. I dug deeper, ignoring the dirt under my fingernails. It was a manhole cover, but it wasn't a standard city sewer cover. It was smaller, made of heavy iron, and stamped with a logo I didn't recognize, a stylized atom symbol, and the year 1952. It had been buried under the dirt for decades before I paved over it. Curiosity got the better of me. I jammed the crowbar under the lip and heaved. It groaned, rusted shut, but my anger gave me strength. With a sharp crack of breaking rust, the lid flipped over. I shined my flashlight into the hole. It wasn't a sewer. It was dry. It was a junction box, but it was unlike anything I had seen in modern engineering. Thick, lead-shielded cables ran through it, disappearing into the dark tunnels on either side, and sitting on top of the cables, preserved in a waterproof canister that had likely fallen from a technician's belt half a century ago, was a roll of blueprints. I reached down and pulled the canister out, the cap unscrewed with a struggle. I pulled out the papers. They were brittle, blue with white lines, smelling of old ozone. Department of Defense, Strategic Infrastructure Map, Pacific Northwest Corridor. I unrolled it further under the beam of my flashlight. My eyes traced the lines, red lines for power, blue lines for water, and a thick, bold yellow line labeled Transcontinental Fiber Trunk, Priority Alpha. I looked at the map, then at the ground beneath my feet. The yellow line went right through the center of Lot 49. I stood up, the rain starting to drizzle again, soaking the priceless paper in my hands. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This wasn't just a parking lot. It wasn't just a rest stop. I was standing on top of the jugular vein of the internet, a piece of forgotten infrastructure that linked the continent. And nobody knew it was here, except me. Profit has a specific sound. In the shipping industry, it sounds like the hiss of air brakes releasing. At Secure Transit Hub 49, that sound had become a symphony. 3 months had passed since I paved over the forgotten infrastructure of the Pacific Northwest. At that time, I had stopped sleeping and started building. The $20 parking fee was just the hook. The real money was in the ecosystem I had created around the drivers. I realized quickly that a truck driver's biggest enemy was not time or traffic, but the sheer inconvenience of their existence. They were essential to the economy, yet treated like lepers everywhere they went. I changed that. I reinvested every single cent of profit back into the asphalt. I hired Ramirez, a retired diesel mechanic with hands like catcher's mitts and a bad hip, to run a quick-fix bay in the second warehouse. We did not do engine rebuilds, but we changed tires, replaced mud flaps, and swapped out blown fuses in 20 minutes flat. Drivers loved it. They could sleep, shower, and get their rig legal again without ever leaving the gate. Then I saw the future coming down the highway. Electric semi-trucks were starting to roll out of the factories, and the charging infrastructure was non-existent. I took a massive risk. I leveraged the deed to the land, my only asset, to secure a business loan, and installed 4 high-voltage direct current fast chargers. They hummed with a terrifying amount of power, sucking electricity from the grid like thirsty giants. It worked. The big logistics fleets started routing their electric prototypes specifically to my lot because I was the only reliable juice joint within 50 miles of the port. My revenue stream was not just a trickle anymore, it was a fire hose. But success draws attention, and not all of it is the kind you want. I was in the office container, auditing the monthly electricity usage, when Elias knocked on the door. Elias was a fixture of the neighborhood, a man who had lived on the streets of the industrial district since before I was born. He pushed a shopping cart filled with aluminum cans and possessed a pair of eyes that missed nothing. I let him sleep under the overhang of the mechanic's bay in exchange for keeping the sidewalk clear of broken glass. "Coffee is fresh, Elias," I said, not looking up from my spreadsheet. "Not here for coffee, boss lady," Elias rasped. He stood in the doorway, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He looked agitated. "You got sharks circling." I paused, typing a final figure into the cell. "Sharks? You mean the health inspector again?" "Suits," Elias said, spitting the word out like a curse. "Fancy shoes, Italian leather. Mud don't stick to shoes like that unless they are walking where they do not belong." "Where were they?" "Perimeter." He pointed a gnarled finger toward the west fence, the side bordering the abandoned cannery. 3 of them. They had lasers, measuring things, pointing at your lot, pointing at the sky. They saw me and scattered like roaches. A cold prickle danced down my neck. Surveyors. "Thanks, Elias," I said, reaching into the petty cash box and handing him a $20 bill. "Keep your eyes open." As soon as he left, I locked the door and pulled up the county property assessor's website. I was not just a parking lot attendant. I was an engineer with a background in logistics. I knew how to track movement. I started clicking through the parcels of land surrounding Lot 49, the old cannery to the west, the defunct textile mill to the north, the empty stretch of scrubland to the south. My breath hitched. 3 months ago, these properties were owned by a scattered collection of bankrupt families and the city council. Now, they are all owned by limited liability companies. Blue Horizon Holdings, LLC, Apex Shell Properties, LLC, Zenith Land Acquisition Group. The names were generic, designed to be forgettable, but I looked at the filing dates. They had all been purchased in the last 6 weeks. Someone was aggregating land, aggressively, and Lot 49 was the hole in the donut. They were buying everything around me, tightening a noose I hadn't even known was there. My phone rang, shattering the silence. I jumped. It was Tiffany. I stared at the screen. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but the adrenaline from my discovery had me on edge. I swiped answer. "What is it? Tiffany?" Gretchen. Her voice was high, frantic, and sounded wet. She was crying. "Oh my God, you have to help me. It is a disaster, an absolute disaster." "Is the villa on fire?" I asked, my voice devoid of sympathy. "Worse," she wailed. "The landscaping. You know, the Japanese moss garden I ordered. The one that is supposed to align my spiritual energy. The contractors are here, and they say the check bounced. They are threatening to rip it all up. They are going to take my moss. Gretchen, I need $50,000, just for a week, until Mom and Dad liquidate some stocks." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at a line of 18-wheelers waiting to enter my gate. $50,000 for moss. That is fascinating. Tiffany? Don't be jealous. Gretchen, just wire me the money. I know you are hoarding cash from that little parking scam of yours. Dad said you are probably making peanuts. But peanuts add up, right? "I am not a bank, Tiffany," I said, "and I am certainly not funding your moss while you insult my business." "Please," she shrieked. "I will tell everyone you are the best sister ever on Instagram. I will tag you." "I do not want your tags," I said, "but I will help you out." "Really?" "Oh, thank you. I knew you weren't a total monster." "Check your email," I said. I heard the ping of a notification on her end. There was a pause, then a screech of rage that forced me to pull the phone away from my ear. "A coupon?" she screamed. 50% off a chassis wax and undercarriage wash. Are you insane? "It is transferable," I said calmly. "Maybe the contractor drives a truck. Goodbye, Tiffany." I hung up and turned my phone to silent, but the peace did not last long. 2 hours later, a sleek black Lincoln Town car rolled up to the entrance gate. It looked absurdly out of place amongst the grime-streaked Kenworths and Peterbilts. The driver honked the horn a polite, insistent beep that was infinitely more annoying than the air horns of the trucks. I looked at the security monitor. I recognized the license plate. Alderney 1. I sighed, grabbed my hard hat, and walked out to the gate. I did not open it. I stood on the inside of the chain-link fence, forcing them to roll down the window. My father was driving. My mother was in the passenger seat. They both wore oversized sunglasses, shielding their eyes not from the sun, but from the ugliness of my reality. "Open the gate, Gretchen," my father commanded. He did not say hello. "This is a commercial zone. Richard," I said, using his first name. It felt good. "Authorized vehicles only. Your car is too clean." "Do not be petulant," my mother snapped, leaning across the center console. She held a handkerchief over her nose. "Ideally, we wouldn't be here at all. The smell is atrocious. Is that diesel and rotting fish?" "It is the smell of commerce, Mother," I said. "What do you want?" "We are here to save you," my father said, turning off the engine. "Open the gate so we can talk in private. I do not want to shout over the noise of these beasts." He gestured vaguely at the trucks. I keyed the code, and the gate slid open just enough for them to walk through. I did not let the car in. They stepped out, their expensive loafers grimacing as they touched the asphalt. My mother pulled her coat tight around her, as if afraid the poverty of the place might be contagious. We stood near the office container. My father looked around, his lip curling in a sneer. "So this is it. You have turned it into a truck stop. How quaint." "It is profitable," I said. "More profitable than Tiffany's Moss Garden, I assume." My father stiffened. "Leave your sister out of this. She is sensitive." He reached into his jacket pocket, the same pocket that had once held the deed to this place, and pulled out a folded document. "Look, Gretchen, your mother and I have been worried. This life, this grime, is not suitable for an Alderney. We have a reputation to uphold." "I thought you said I was the mistake you were scrubbing away," I reminded him. "We were emotional," my mother said smoothly. "We want what is best for you." Your father spoke to a friend of his, a Mr. Henderson. He is a real estate developer who specializes in cleaning up blighted areas like this. "Mr. Henderson is willing to take this burden off your hands," my father said, extending the paper toward me. "He is offering $250,000, cash. You can walk away. Gretchen, you can buy a nice little condo in the suburbs. Get a job that doesn't require steel-toed boots." I took the paper. It was a standard purchase agreement. The buyer was listed as Zenith Land Acquisition Group. My heart hammered against my ribs. Zenith, one of the shell companies I had found earlier. My father wasn't just here to belittle me. He was a pawn, or worse, a co-conspirator. $250,000, I repeated. For a fully operational logistics hub in a prime port sector. It is a parking lot. "Gretchen," my father barked, losing his composure. "It is a patch of dirt covered in oil. You should be on your knees thanking me for finding a buyer who is willing to pay anything for this dump." "Who is Mr. Henderson?" I asked. "Does he work for Omnicorp? Or maybe Blue Horizon?" My father's eyes flickered. It was a micro-expression, a split second of surprise. But I caught it. He knew something, maybe not the full picture, maybe not the $2 billion secret buried in the junction box under our feet, but he knew this land was being hunted. "It does not matter who he is," my father growled. "He is a way out. Sign the paper. Gretchen, don't be stupid." "No," I said. I ripped the paper in half. Then I ripped the halves again. My mother gasped. "Gretchen, have you lost your mind?" "I think I have finally found it," I said, letting the confetti of the contract fall to the wet asphalt. "The answer is no. This land is not for sale. Not to Henderson, not to Zenith, and certainly not to you." My father stepped forward, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. He invaded my personal space, looming over me in a way that used to make me cower when I was a child. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. I gave you this land, and I can take it back. I have connections in this city. I can have you rezoned. I can have you buried in fines." "Riot," I said, holding my ground. "But you should know. The deed is in my name. Sole ownership. You made sure of that when you threw it at me." "I am your father," he roared. "I demand you sign. You ceased to be my father the moment you laughed at me for being poor." I said quietly, "Now, you are just a trespasser. If you do not sign this," he hissed, pointing a finger in my face, "I will cut you off completely. No access to the family trust, which is empty anyway thanks to your sister. But you don't know that no contact, nothing. You will be dead to us." "I was already dead to you," I said. "I'm just making it official." I turned my back on him and walked toward the control panel mounted on the side of the wash bay. "Where are you going?" my mother shrieked. "We are not finished." "Yes, we are," I said. I reached the panel. There was a large red button labeled Emergency Rinse. It was designed to blast high-pressure water from the overhead nozzles to clear chemical spills off tankers. It delivered 300 pounds per square inch of pressure. I looked at them. They were standing right in the center of the wash zone, near the drainage grate. "I am going to count to 3, I announced. "If you are not outside the gate, I am initiating a cleaning cycle. And trust me, this place needs to be cleaned of trash." "You wouldn't dare," my father sneered. "One," I said. My mother looked at the massive nozzles hanging overhead. She saw the gleam in my eye. She grabbed my father's arm. "Richard, let's go." "No," he shouted. "She is bluffing." "Two," I said. My hand hovered over the button. "Richard, move," my mother screamed. Her socialite composure shattering. She started running toward the gate, her heels clicking frantically. My father stood his ground for a fraction of a second longer, staring at me with pure hatred, but he saw it. He saw that I was not the little girl who sat in the corner at dinner parties anymore. I was the woman who built a fortress out of a garbage dump. He turned and ran. "Three," I whispered. I slammed my palm onto the button. A mechanical roar shook the ground as the pumps engaged. Twin jets of water exploded from the side nozzles, creating a crossfire of liquid force. They missed my parents by inches, slamming into the pavement where they had been standing a second ago with enough force to strip paint. The spray soaked them instantly, drenching my mother's coat and ruining my father's Italian leather shoes. They scrambled through the gate, slipping on the wet pavement, looking like drowned rats fleeing a sinking ship. They dove into the Lincoln and peeled away, tires screeching. I stood there, hand on the button, watching the water cascade down the drain. It washed away the pieces of the torn contract. It washed away the mud from their tires. I turned the system off. Silence returned to the lot, broken only by the hum of the electric chargers. Elias walked out from behind the mechanic's bay, slow clapping. "That," he said with a toothless grin, "was a beautiful thing." "Back to work, Elias," I said, though my voice was shaking. I walked back into the office and locked the door. I sat down and put my head in my hands. I was shaking, yes, but I was also smiling. I had just declared war, and I had the biggest weapon on the battlefield. I looked down at the floor, imagining the yellow line on the map beneath the concrete. "Come and get it," I whispered to the empty room. While my sister was busy watching her social credit score plummet, I was watching my actual net worth prepare for a vertical takeoff. The contrast between our lives had become a study in physics. Tiffany was a collapsing star, burning bright and violent before the inevitable implosion. I was a black hole, quiet, unseen, but possessing a gravitational pull that was about to swallow everything in its orbit. It began on a Thursday, in Malibu. Tiffany was hosting what she called the White Party at the Sapphire Coast Villa, according to the Instagram stories I hate-watched during my coffee break. The theme required all guests to wear white linen and sip clear tequila. It was an orgy of superficiality. She had hired a DJ from Ibiza and a catering team that served gold-flaked caviar. But behind the filters, the cracks were visible. I noticed the staff looked unhappy, likely because their checks were clearing slower than the fog over the Pacific. Tiffany herself looked manic, her eyes too wide, her laughter a little too shrill. She had leveraged her credit cards to the hilt to fund this charade, convinced that one great party would attract the investors she needed for her non-existent lifestyle brand. She did not know that her financial coffin had already been nailed shut, not by her, but by our parents, while Tiffany was dancing on a table. I was sitting in a soundproof glass office at Apex Logistics, across the desk from Marcus, the regional director. Marcus was a man who spoke in bullet points and valued efficiency over oxygen. "Close the door, Gretchen," he said. I did. The hum of the logistics floor vanished. "I have intel," Marcus said, leaning forward. "Big intel. It does not leave this room." "Understood," I said. "Omnicorp." He whispered the name like it was a deity. "The tech giant. They are moving their AI division headquarters. They are looking for a site in the Pacific Northwest. But it is not just an office building. It is a data center. A hyperscale compute node is what they call it." I nodded, my mind racing. Data centers were common, but Omnicorp was different. "Here is the kicker," Marcus continued. "They have specific infrastructure requirements that are making their site selection team tear their hair out." They need a location that sits directly on the convergence of three specific transcontinental fiber optic trunk lines for zero-latency connection to Asia and Europe. And they need access to a legacy high-voltage grid that was decommissioned in the 80s but never removed, because it bypasses the modern residential load restrictions. My heart stopped. Then it restarted with the force of a pile driver. 3 fiber lines, I repeated, and legacy high voltage. Correct, Marcus said. They are willing to pay an obscene amount for the right dirt, but they can't find it. Every site has 1 or 2, but not all 3. I left the meeting with my hands shaking. I drove straight to Lot 49. I called Sam, an old college friend who was now a geological surveyor for the state. I told him to bring his ground-penetrating radar and a non-disclosure agreement. We spent the night scanning the sector I had paved over. The rain was relentless, soaking us to the bone, but I did not feel the cold. At 4 a.m, Sam looked at his monitor and whistled. Gretchen, you are not going to believe this. He pointed to the screen. The radar showed the underground topography in layers. There was the yellow line I had found on the map the Department of Defense trunk, but crossing it, deeper in the bedrock, were 2 other distinct cables. One was a commercial line from the 90s. The other was a dark fiber line laid by a failed telecom giant in the early 2000s. They formed a perfect triangle directly under my mechanic's bay. And look here, Sam said, tracing a jagged red line on the screen. That is an old industrial feeder line for the shipyard. It is dead now, but the copper is still there, and it connects directly to the hydroelectric substation. It is a dedicated grid. I have the trifecta, I whispered. You do not just have the trifecta, Sam said, wiping rain from his glasses. You have the only plug-in point in the entire city. This dirt. It is the heart of the machine. I sent Sam home with a fat check and a stern reminder to keep his mouth shut. I stood alone on my lot, looking at the puddles reflecting the floodlights. I wasn't standing on a parking lot. I was standing on the launch pad for the next industrial revolution. While I was discovering my fortune, Tiffany was losing hers. The morning after her party, while the hired cleaners were sweeping up broken glass and vomit from the travertine floors of the villa. A sheriff's deputy knocked on the door. He wasn't there for a mimosa. He handed Tiffany a foreclosure notice. It turned out that Tiffany's spending was only half the problem. She had blown her liquid cash on a cryptocurrency scam called MoonSafe that had rug-pulled 3 days prior, wiping out her savings. But the death blow came from our parents. To keep their own failing manufacturing business afloat, my father had secretly used the deed to the Malibu villa as collateral for a high-risk bridge loan. He had defaulted. The bank didn't care about Tiffany's lifestyle brand. They wanted the house. 2 days later, the Alderney convoy arrived at Secure Transit Hub 49. It was raining again. The gray sky mirrored the mood. My parents' Lincoln was gone, replaced by a rental sedan that smelled of cigarette smoke. Tiffany was with them. She looked like a ghost of her former self. Her designer clothes were rumpled, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes were swollen red. I was inside the container office, reviewing the quarterly profit margins, which were up 12% when they barged in. My security guard, a burly ex-Marine named Knox, stepped forward to stop them, but I waved him off. Let them in. Knox, I said, I want to hear this. They crowded into the small metal room. It smelled of coffee and toner. My father refused to look me in the eye. My mother was wringing her hands, her knuckles white. Tiffany just stared at the floor, shivering. We need $500,000, my father said. No preamble, no hello, just the demand. I leaned back in my chair, spinning a pen between my fingers. That is a specific number. It is the interest payment and penalties to stop the auction. My mother blurted out. They are taking the villa. Gretchen. On Monday, if we pay them $500,000 by close of business today, they will grant a stay of execution. And why is that my problem? I asked. Because she is your sister, my mother cried. Because we are family. How can you sit here on your pile of cash, making money off these truckers, while your sister is about to be homeless? Tiffany looked up, her lip trembling. Please, Gretchen, I have nowhere else to go. All my friends stopped answering my texts when the news broke. You are the only one left. Family, I repeated the word, tasting the bile in it. That is a funny word coming from you people. We know we have had our differences, my father grunted. But blood is thicker than water. You have done well for yourself here with this little business. We are proud of you. Now help us. Proud of me? I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Is that why you called Frank Russo at Redwood Trucking last week? The room went deadly silent. My father's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Do not lie to me, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. Frank is one of my biggest clients. He told me everything. You called him. You told him that my lot was under investigation for trafficking stolen goods. You told him I was unstable and off my medication. You tried to spook my customers to bankrupt me so I would be forced to sell the land to your friend Henderson. Tiffany gasped. She looked at our father. Daddy, you did what? I did it for the family, my father shouted, slamming his hand on my desk. We needed the money from the sale. This place is a dump, Gretchen. It was supposed to be a quick flip, not a career. You were supposed to fail so we could cash out. The truth hung in the air like toxic smoke. They hadn't just neglected me, they had actively tried to destroy me. So, I said, standing up, you tried to kill my business, failed. And now, you want me to use the profits from that business to save the house you stole from your favorite daughter to cover your own debts. It is a loan, my mother pleaded. We will pay you back. With what? I asked. Your reputation. It is worthless. Your stocks. They are gone. You are radioactive. Gretchen, please, Tiffany sobbed. Stepping forward, she reached for my hand. I didn't know about the call to Redwood. I swear I am the victim here too. Daddy lied to me. I pulled my hand away. You are not a victim, Tiffany. You are a parasite. You mocked me when I was down. You told me to sleep in a tent on this lot. Well, guess what? The lot is warm. The villa is cold. Deal with it. I am not leaving until you write the check, Tiffany screamed, her sorrow instantly snapping into the spoilt rage I knew so well. You owe me. I am the older sister. I am the one who matters. Get out, I said. Tiffany's eyes went wild. She grabbed a heavy ceramic stapler from my desk and hurled it at me. I dodged, and it smashed into the window behind me, cracking the glass. I hate you, she shrieked, grabbing my laptop. Knox, I yelled. The door flew open. Knox didn't hesitate. He grabbed Tiffany by the back of her designer coat and hauled her backward. She kicked and screamed, flailing like a toddler. Get your hands off her, my father shouted, puffing out his chest. Knox looked at my father. Knox was 6'4" and had scars from Fallujah. My father was a 60-year-old man who got winded climbing stairs. Sir, Knox said, his voice like grinding stones, I strongly suggest you walk out before I assist you. My father withered. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of impotent fury. You will regret this, Gretchen. You are making a mistake. The only mistake was letting you in the gate, I said. Knox dragged Tiffany out, her heels scraping across the metal floor. My parents followed, heads bowed, not in shame, but in defeat. I watched through the cracked window as Knox escorted them all the way to the perimeter. He didn't stop at the gate. He pushed them out onto the public sidewalk and locked the chain. Tiffany stood there, banging on the fence, screaming obscenities at the trucks rolling by. My parents tried to pull her away, looking around fearfully to see if anyone important was watching. I picked up the phone and dialed the glazier to fix my window. Then I dialed Marcus at Apex. Marcus, I said, tell Omnicorp I am ready to talk, but tell them the price just went up. How much? Marcus asked. Tell them I have the triangle, I said. Tell them I have the power, and tell them if they want it, They are going to have to make me a partner, not just a seller. I hung up. The stapler was still on the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. I kicked it aside. My family was gone. The parasites had been purged. Now, it was time to build an empire. The approach happened at 3 a.m, the witching hour of logistics. When the world is asleep, but the supply chain is hyperactive. I was in the command center, formerly the container office, now upgraded with bulletproof glass and a dedicated server rack monitoring the flow of electric trucks charging at the bays. The rain was hammering against the metal roof. A constant drum roll that usually helped me think, but tonight, the rhythm was broken by a vehicle that did not belong. It was not a truck. It was not a delivery van. It was a matte black SUV with tinted windows and government plates, gliding silently through the open gate like a shark entering a koi pond. Knox, my head of security, was already on the radio. "Boss, we have an unidentified vehicle. Want me to bounce them?" "Stand down. Knox," I said, watching the monitor. "Let them park, but keep the perimeter locked." The car stopped exactly 20 feet from my door. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. He was not wearing a raincoat. Despite the deluge, he wore a suit that cost more than my first car, and he moved with the arrogant indifference of someone who knew the rain wouldn't dare ruin his silk tie. I met him at the door. I did not invite him in. "Ms. Alderney," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and completely devoid of humanity. "My name is Sterling. I represent a client who values privacy." "You represent Omnicorp," I said. "Let's skip the spy novel intro." "What do you want?" Sterling smiled. A thin stretching of lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Direct. I like that. We have been monitoring your improvements to Lot 49. Impressive work. My client is authorized to make you a one-time, non-negotiable offer to acquire the property." He reached into his jacket pocket. I tensed, but he only pulled out a heavy cream envelope. He handed it to me. I opened it. There was a single sheet of paper inside. On it was a number, $50 million. The air left my lungs. 50 million? It was enough money to disappear. It was enough to buy an island. It was enough to burn my family's entire legacy to the ground and dance on the ashes. "We need an answer within 24 hours, Sterling said, checking his watch. "The funds are in escrow, sign, and the money is wired by morning. You walk away rich." My hand trembled slightly, but I forced it still. The engineer in me, the part that calculated load-bearing limits and stress fractures, screamed a warning. You do not pay $50 million for a truck stop in an industrial wasteland unless you are desperate. I looked at Sterling. "No," his smile vanished. "Excuse me." "No," I repeated, handing the paper back. "The price is wrong." "Ms. Alderney," his voice dropped, becoming colder. "This is 5 times the market value. Do not let greed cloud your judgment. You are sitting on a parking lot." "I am sitting on a junction box," I said softly. Sterling froze. It was subtle, a slight tightening of the jaw, a flicker of the eyelids, but I saw it. I had hit the nerve. "Get off my land," I said. "And tell your bosses that if they want to talk again, they better bring a bigger checkbook and the truth." Sterling stared at me for a long moment, assessing the threat level. Then he nodded, once, and got back in the car. As the black SUV peeled away, I knew I had just kicked a hornet's nest. I spent the next 6 hours in a fever state of research. I did not sleep. I called in every favor I had at Apex Logistics. I used the dark web terminals I had set up for secure freight tracking to dig into Omnicorp's filing history. By noon, the picture was terrifyingly clear. Omnicorp was not just building an office. They were building Project Cortex, a $100 billion AI neural network hub designed to control global autonomous shipping lanes. And the technical specifications were rigid. They needed to be within 500 feet of the legacy power grid junction to stabilize their quantum processors. If they could not build on Lot 49, they could not build in Seattle at all. They would have to move the entire project to the Nevada desert, which would cost them an estimated $12 billion in relocation fees and set their timeline back by 3 years. In the tech world, 3 years was an eternity. I wasn't holding a royal flush. I was holding the only deck of cards in the building. But while I was playing three-dimensional chess with a corporate giant, my family decided to show up playing checkers at 2 in the afternoon. A taxi pulled up to the gate. My parents stepped out. They looked different from the last time Knox had thrown them out. My mother was wearing a modest wool coat instead of her usual fur. My father was carrying a Tupperware container. They looked humble. They looked weary. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I let them into the office, but I left the door open and kept Knox standing right outside. I also tapped the icon on my phone screen that started a hidden audio recording. "Gretchen," my mother said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We brought you some chicken soup. We know you work so hard we were worried you weren't eating." She placed the Tupperware on the desk next to my monitors. It was warm. The domesticity of it was so jarring against the backdrop of my high-stakes reality that I almost laughed. "Soup," I said. "Okay, what is the play, Richard?" "No play," my father said, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "We have been doing some soul-searching. Gretchen, losing the villa changed us. We realized we treated you unfairly." "Is that so?" I asked, leaning back. "Yes," my mother chimed in, wiping a dry eye. "We want to make things right. We want to protect you. We heard rumors that the city is planning to rezone this area for waste management, a sewage treatment plant. Gretchen, if that happens, this land will be worthless." They had heard rumors, probably from the bottom feeders like Henderson. They knew something was happening, but they had no idea about Omnicorp or the billions at stake. They thought the land was worth maybe a few million, and they wanted to steal it back before the sewage plant rumor, which was likely a cover story planted by Omnicorp to suppress prices, became true. "That sounds terrible," I said, widening my eyes in mock horror. "What should I do?" My father sighed, looking pained. "We found something. Gretchen, in the old family files. It seems there was a clerical error when we transferred the deed to you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a document. It looked aged, the paper slightly yellowed. "This is the original addendum," he said, sliding it across the desk. "It states that the transfer of Lot 49 was a conditional trust, not a gift. It means we technically still own 50% of the property. But don't worry, we don't want the money. We just want to help you sell it quickly to a friend of mine before the city seizes it. We can get maybe $2 million. We will split it with you." I looked at the document. It was a forgery, a good one, but a forgery. The notary stamp was from a man named Arthur P. Jenkins. I knew for a fact that the notary my father used for 30 years was a woman named Sarah, and the date on the stamp was a Sunday. Notaries didn't work on Sundays in 1998. "So," I said slowly, ensuring the microphone on my phone caught every word, "you are telling me that this document proves you still own half of this land, and you want to sell it immediately to protect me?" "Exactly," my mother said, smiling eagerly. "We just want to save you from ruin. Sweetheart, sign the authorization, and your father will handle everything." "I am so confused," I said, playing the part of the overwhelmed daughter. "I need to have my lawyer look at this, just to be sure." "Lawyers are expensive," my father snapped, then quickly softened his tone. "Why waste money? We are family. Trust us." "I will think about it," I said. "Leave the document here." "We can't leave the original," my father said, snatching it back. "But we can leave a copy." He handed me a photocopy. That was all I needed. "Thanks for the soup," I said. "Now get out. I have a sewage plant to worry about." As they left, looking triumphant, I felt a cold knot of disgust in my stomach. They were trying to swindle me out of $2 billion in exchange for $1 million and a bowl of soup. Their greed was only matched by their incompetence, but the betrayal wasn't over. 10 minutes later, Knox radioed me. "Boss, You need to see this. Channel 4? I pulled up the security feed from the perimeter cameras. The camera pointed toward the alley behind the east warehouse, a blind spot I had recently covered with a hidden lens. There was Tiffany. She was huddled in the rain, wearing a hoodie, talking to a man in a gray trench coat. I zoomed in. The man was holding a tablet. Tiffany was pointing at the screen, tracing lines. I recognized the man. He was an acquisition shark for Zenith Land, the shell company my father had tried to sell to earlier. Audio, I asked Knox. Parabolic mic is hot, Knox replied. The sound crackled through my speakers. Know the codes to the gate, Tiffany's voice hissed. And I know she keeps the blueprints in the safe in the back container. I saw where she put them. How much is that worth? 5,000, the man said. Cash. Make it 10. Tiffany haggled. I need to buy a new purse. My own sister was selling the security secrets of my facility secrets that protected the lives of innocent drivers for the price of a handbag. Record it all, I told Knox. Do not intervene. Let her dig the hole deeper. I turned off the monitor. The soup on my desk had gone cold. I swept it into the trash can. My phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize. This is Gretchen. Ms. Alderney, a woman's voice said. Sharp, precise, authoritative. My name is Veronica Vance. I am a forensic land valuation analyst. You don't know me, but Marcus at Apex sent me your file. We need to meet, now. I met her an hour later in the back of a 24-hour diner. Veronica was a small woman with glasses thick enough to stop a bullet. She had a laptop open on the sticky table. You refused $50 million, she said, not looking up as I sat down. I did. Good, she said, because they were trying to rob you. She spun the laptop around. On the screen was a three-dimensional model of Lot 49, but it went up into the sky and deep into the earth. Everyone is looking at the ground, Veronica said, tapping the screen. But you need to look at the air and the easement. Explain, I said. This junction box. She pointed to the red dot in the center of my lot. It carries an exclusive right-of-way clause from the Cold War era. It means that whoever owns the land above it has the legal right to control any digital traffic passing through it. Omnicorp doesn't just need to sit on your land. They need your permission to send data through those cables. She tapped a key, and the model expanded upward. And here, she pointed to the sky, your lot is in a flight path restriction zone for SeaTac Airport, but there is a grandfather clause that allows for a structure up to 80 stories because of an old smokestack that used to be there. Omnicorp needs cooling towers for their servers, massive ones. Every other lot in this sector is capped at 4 stories. You are the only one who can build the chimney they need to vent the heat from $100 billion worth of processors. She looked at me, her eyes magnified behind the lenses. I ran the numbers. Gretchen, based on the cost of relocation, the value of the air rights, and the strategic monopoly of the data easement, the valuation is not $50 million. She wrote a number on a napkin and slid it across the table. $2 billion, $100 million. That is the floor, she said. If you negotiate hard, the ceiling is higher. I stared at the napkin. The number was so large it didn't look real. It looked like a phone number. 2.1 billion. I looked out the window of the diner. Across the street, a wet, miserable dog was digging through a trash can. Yesterday, that was me. Tomorrow, I would own the city. I picked up the napkin and folded it carefully into my pocket. Veronica, I said, do you want a job? I charge $500 an hour, she said. I will pay you $1,000, I said. Draft the paperwork. We are not selling the land. We are selling the permission to exist. I walked out of the diner. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. I pulled out my phone and looked at the recording of my parents and the video of Tiffany. They wanted a war. They wanted to play games with deeds and spies. Fine. I was about to drop a nuclear bomb on their little game of checkers, and I was going to do it with a smile. Refusal is a powerful act, but in the world of the Alderneys, it is treated as a declaration of war. I did not sign their forged addendum. I did not sell my soul for a bowl of chicken soup. I sent them away with their photocopy and their lies. Believing that my possession of the truth was shield enough, I was wrong. The truth is a shield, but a lie is a missile. And my sister Tiffany had the launch codes. It started 6 hours after I kicked them out. I was in the command bunker, reviewing the thermal schematics for the server cooling towers Veronica had proposed. When my phone began to vibrate, it wasn't a call. It was a notification, then another, then 10, then a continuous, angry buzz that rattled the desk. I unlocked the screen. My social media feeds, which I rarely used, were detonating. Tiffany had posted a video. It was titled, "The Heartless Truth: How My Sister Stole Our Family Legacy." I watched it. She was sitting on the floor of what looked like a cheap motel room, a nice touch of staged poverty, wearing no makeup. Her hair messily tied back. She looked broken. She looked like a victim. "I didn't want to do this," she whispered to the camera, wiping away a tear that was almost certainly induced by eye drops. "But I can't stay silent while my parents suffer. My sister, Gretchen, tricked our parents. They are elderly. They are confused. She manipulated them into signing over the family land, promising to take care of them. Instead, she threw them out. She runs a dirty business there. And when we went to beg her for help, just for money for Dad's heart medication, she turned the hose on us." She laughed. The video cut to a shaky clip she had filmed secretly from the back seat of the car as they fled. It showed my parents drenched, shivering, looking terrified. It did not show the context. It did not show the forgery. It only showed a cruel daughter attacking her frail parents with industrial machinery. The internet, in its infinite lack of nuance, devoured it. The comments rolled in by the thousands. Monster, elder abuser, boycott, secure transit hub. 49. Someone should burn that place down. I turned the phone over, face down. My hands were cold. This wasn't just family drama. This was a strategic strike designed to destroy my character so completely that when they sued to reclaim the land, the judge would already hate me. Then came the physical attacks. The next morning, the first government vehicle rolled up. It wasn't Omnicorp. It was the Department of Environmental Protection. "Anonymous tip," the inspector said, slamming his clipboard onto my desk. "Report of illegal dumping of toxic chemicals into the municipal drainage system." "That is a lie," I said. "We use eco-friendly detergents." "We will see," he said. He shut down the wash bay for 3 days pending lab results. That was 40% of my daily revenue gone. 2 hours later, the fire marshal arrived. Another anonymous tip about faulty wiring in the charging stations. He didn't find any, but he spent 4 hours testing every breaker, blocking the entrance and forcing a line of paying trucks to turn around and leave. By Wednesday, the police had raided the lot twice, looking for trafficked narcotics that a concerned citizen claimed were being stored in my shipping containers. They brought dogs. They cut the locks off 3 containers belonging to my customers. They found nothing but auto parts and frozen fish. But the damage was done. My phone rang. It was Frank Russo, the owner of the fleet that made up 30% of my business. "Gretchen," Frank's voice was heavy. "I like you. You run a clean shop, but I can't have my drivers caught up in this. The cops, the inspectors. It is too much heat. We are pulling the fleet." "Frank, please," I said, gripping the phone. "This is a hit job. It will blow over." "I can't risk it, kid," he said. "Call me when the smoke clears." The line went dead. I looked out the window. The lot, usually bustling with the noise of engines and the shouts of drivers, was eerily quiet. Only 2 trucks remained. The drivers were in their cabs, curtains drawn, hiding. My revenue stream didn't just dip. It flatlined. I had payroll to meet. I had the loan payment for the chargers. I had the electricity bill for the floodlights. Without the trucks, I was bleeding out. I sat in the dark office, the red light of the security camera blinking at me. I was sitting on land worth $2 billion, and I was about to go bankrupt over a $5,000 electric bill. Panic clawed at my throat. I could sell. I could call Sterling back, take the $50 million, and run. It would end the harassment. It would give me a life. But then I looked at the shattered window Tiffany had broken, now covered with duct tape and cardboard. I looked at the fake deed my father had tried to pass off. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to crawl back to them, defeated, so they could pat my head and take my victory. No, I said to the silence. I opened my banking app. I had $12,000 left in my personal savings. It was my emergency fund. It was my lifeline. I transferred every cent of it to a new account. I called Knox. "Get in here and bring the laptop." Knox walked in, looking grim. "It is a ghost town out there, boss. The guys are scared." "Let them be scared," I said. "We are going on the offensive. I need a lawyer, not a real estate lawyer, a shark, someone who hates the Alderney family name." "I know a guy," Knox said. "He was a prosecutor. Got disbarred for being too aggressive. Now he runs a private practice. He hates bullies." "Hire him," I said. "And I need a private investigator, someone who can dig through 20 years of paper trails in 24 hours. "That would be my cousin Sal," Knox said. "He is expensive." "I just wired you the money," I said. "Tell Sal I want everything. Tax returns, offshore accounts, shell companies. If my father bought a pack of gum in 1995, I want to see the receipt." For the next 48 hours, the office became a war room. We lived on stale coffee and adrenaline, while the internet continued to burn me in effigy. Sal and the lawyer, a man named Mr. Thorne, who looked like he slept in his suit, went to work. The breakthrough came at 4 a.m. on Friday. "Got him," Sal said, pointing at a spreadsheet on his screen. "Your dad is not just bad with money. He is a felon." I leaned in. "Show me." "Alderney Manufacturing," Sal explained, tracing the lines of transactions. "It has been bleeding money for a decade. But look at these injections of cash. Every month, $50,000 comes in from a company called Sapphire Consulting, registered in the Cayman Islands." "And where does the money go?" I asked. "It goes out as consulting fees to a company called Tiffany A. LLC, Sal said. "And then it comes back into your dad's personal account as loan repayments." "He is laundering money through Tiffany?" I asked, disgusted. "It is worse, Mr. Thorne added, tapping a stack of papers. "He is evading taxes on the manufacturing plant by claiming losses that don't exist. He is cooking the books to hide assets from creditors, and that mortgage on the villa. He signed an affidavit stating the property was unencumbered when he took the loan. That is bank fraud, federal bank fraud." I looked at the documents. It was the smoking gun. It was the nuclear launch key. "We have enough to send him to prison for 20 years. "Mr. Thorne said, "Do you want to file the charges?" I looked at the screen, at the numbers that represented my father's greed. "Not yet. Filing charges takes time. I need to stop the bleeding now. I need to clear my name." "How?" Knox asked. "We are going to host a party," I said, standing up. "Call the news stations. Call the bloggers who have been dragging my name through the mud. Tell them Gretchen Alderney is making a confession." Saturday morning broke gray and drizzly. Perfect weather for a public execution. I set up a podium in the center of the empty lot, right over the spot where the junction box lay buried. I placed a large flat-screen monitor next to it. The press arrived in droves. They smelled blood. They expected a tearful apology, a resignation, maybe a breakdown. The local news vans set up their satellites. I saw a few truckers watching from the fence, curious. I walked out to the podium. I wore my charcoal blazer. I did not wear makeup. I looked like an engineer. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice amplified by the PA system. "Thank you for coming. You have heard a lot of stories about me this week. You have heard that I am a monster. You have heard that I abandoned my family." The cameras zoomed in, hungry for the soundbite. "I am not here to apologize," I said. The crowd murmured. I am here to show you the receipts. I pressed a button on a remote. The screen beside me flickered to life. It was the video from the security camera in my office. The date stamp was clearly visible. It showed Tiffany throwing the stapler. It showed her screaming. It showed Knox dragging her out while my parents stood by, watching. Then, the audio played. Dad, we did it for the family. We needed the money from the sale. You were supposed to fail so we could cash out. Mom, it is a loan. We will pay you back. Gretchen, with what your reputation? Tiffany, I hate you. The crowd went silent. The reporters lowered their cameras, looking at each other. This wasn't an elder abuse victim. This was a spoiled brat throwing a tantrum and a father admitting to sabotage. But that is just a family dispute, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Let's talk about the victim narrative. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. It showed the video of Tiffany in the alley, selling my security codes to the Zenith agent. This is my sister, I narrated. Selling the safety of the truck drivers who sleep here for $10,000. She didn't want to save our parents. She wanted to buy a purse. The flashbulbs started popping frantically. The narrative was pivoting in real time. And finally, I said, signaling Knox. Knox walked out carrying a blown-up poster board of the forged deed my father had tried to make me sign. Next to it was the forensic report proving the notary stamp was fake. My parents claimed I stole this land, I said. But here's the document they tried to use to steal it back. A forgery. A crime. I looked directly into the lens of the main news camera. I knew my parents were watching. I knew they were sitting in that rental car, or a cheap hotel, glued to the screen. I did not turn the hose on my parents because I hate them, I said. I turned it on because they were trespassing on private property after trying to extort me. I defended my business. I defended my home. I stepped back from the podium. Any questions? There were no questions. There was only the frantic sound of reporters shouting into their phones, calling their editors to kill the ungrateful daughter headlines and run the corporate sabotage ones instead. As I walked back to the office, my phone buzzed. It was a text message. Not from my family, from an encrypted number. Impressive damage control. We like a partner who can handle a crisis. The offer stands. S. Sterling. Omnicorp was watching, and I had just passed the audition. But I wasn't done. I walked into the office where Mr. Thorne was waiting. Did you send it? I asked. Just now, he said. I picked up my phone and dialed my father's number. He answered on the first ring. He didn't speak. I could hear his heavy breathing. Hello, Richard, I said. You ruined us, he whispered. His voice was trembling. Everyone is seeing this. The bank just called. They are freezing the remaining accounts. I didn't ruin you, I said cold. I just turned on the lights. You are the one who made the mess. What do you want? He asked. We have nothing left. The villa is gone. The reputation is gone. I sent an email to your personal account, I said. It contains a PDF file. It is the forensic accounting report of Alderney Manufacturing, the tax fraud, bank fraud, the laundering. I heard a gasp. How did you... If you or Tiffany ever mention my name in public again, I said, enunciating every syllable. If you ever file a lawsuit, or a complaint, or an anonymous tip, if you ever come within 1 mile of Lot 49, I will hit send on an email to the IRS and the FBI. And you won't just be broke. Richard, you will be in a federal cell. There was a long silence. Then, a sob. A broken, pathetic sound from a man who had thought he was a king. Do we have an agreement? I asked. Yes, he wept. Yes, please, don't send it. Goodbye, I said. I hung up. I walked out of the office and stood on the wet asphalt. The reporters were packing up. The sun was trying to break through the gray clouds. A truck pulled up to the gate one of the independents who hadn't been scared off. He honked his horn and gave me a thumbs up. I waved back. The smear campaign was over. The family ties were severed. The parasites had been burned off. Now, There was only the negotiation, and I was walking into the room with $2 billion worth of leverage and the absolute certainty that I could survive anything. The elevator ride to the penthouse of the Omnicorp Tower took exactly 45 seconds. In that short span of time, my ears popped twice, and I mentally reviewed the valuation model Veronica had built. I was not wearing a suit. I was wearing my best field jacket and steel-toed boots, polished to a mirror shine. It was a calculated choice. I wanted them to smell the asphalt on me. I wanted them to know that I was not a boardroom creature they could intimidate with jargon. I was the reality on the ground. The doors slid open, revealing a conference room that looked more like a starship bridge than a place of business. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of Seattle, including the gray smudge in the distance that was Lot 49. 7 men and women sat around a table made of reclaimed driftwood and epoxy. Sterling was there, looking less arrogant than he had in the rain. At the head of the table sat Arthur Pendleton, Omnicorp's chief legal officer. He was a legend in the corporate world, known as the Shredder, for his ability to dismantle hostile takeovers. "Ms. Alderney," Pendleton said, not standing up. "You are hard to get a hold of." "I have been busy," I said, pulling out a heavy metal chair and sitting down. "Cleaning up messes." "Let us cut to the chase," Pendleton said, steepling his fingers. "We acknowledge the unique strategic value of your property. We are prepared to offer you $100 million, cash, wired today. This is double our previous offer and 10 times the assessed value. Take it, and you never have to work another day in your life." The number hung in the air. $100 million. It was a staggering sum. My parents would have sold their souls for a fraction of it. I placed a single folder on the table. "No," Pendleton sighed, a sound of theatrical patience. "Gretchen, be reasonable. It is a parking lot. We are offering you a lottery win. If you push too hard, we walk away." "No, you won't," I said calmly, "because if you walk away, Project Cortex moves to Nevada. I read your quarterly earnings report. Your investors are expecting the AI rollout in 18 months. Moving to Nevada adds 36 months to your timeline. That delay will tank your stock price by at least 20%. You are not walking anywhere." Pendleton's eyes narrowed. "You have done your homework. Fine. What do you want?" "I do not want a payout," I said. "I want a partnership." I opened the folder. "I want $50 million in cash for immediate liquidity. I want 5% of the preferred stock in the new subsidiary entity that will manage the data center. And I want the exclusive contract to manage the logistics hub that will be built on the surface level. I want to run the trucking and freight operations for the entire campus." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. The lawyers looked at each other. Sterling choked on his water. "That is absurd," Pendleton scoffed. "The equity alone would be worth over $1 billion if the project succeeds. You are asking for a valuation of nearly $2 billion for a plot of dirt." "I am asking for $2.1 billion, I corrected him. "And it is not for the dirt. It is for the permission to exist." "We will not do it." Pendleton slammed his hand on the table. "We will bury you. We have the mayor on speed dial. We will petition the city to seize your land under eminent domain laws. We will argue that your truck stop is a public nuisance and that our project is in the vital public interest. We will take the land from you for market value, which is about $4 million, and we will leave you with nothing but legal fees." "I expected you to say that," I said. I pulled a second document from the folder. "Which is why I brought this." I slid a map across the table. It showed Lot 49, but it also highlighted 4 thin, irregular strips of land surrounding it. "While you were busy drafting threats," I said, "I was busy shopping. You see, eminent domain requires the seizure of a specific, contiguous plot for a public purpose. But 3 weeks ago, I used the profits from my business to purchase these 4 parcels." I pointed to the highlighted strips. This one was a drainage ditch owned by the county. This one was an access road owned by a bankrupt cannery. This one was a sliver of land between the warehouses. I bought them all. They are now titled to 4 different holding companies, all registered in different jurisdictions. I leaned forward. If you try to seize Lot 49, you will be landlocked. You won't be able to run power lines, water pipes, or even a driveway to the main road without crossing these 4 Iron Belt properties, and I will fight the seizure of each one separately. It will take 10 years in court. Do you have 10 years? Arthur. Pendleton stared at the map. His face turned a shade of gray that matched the Seattle sky. He looked at Sterling. Sterling looked at the floor. You blocked us in, Pendleton whispered. You created a legal siege. I built a fortress, I said. Now, do you want to keep threatening me? Or do you want to sign the deal and break ground next month? Pendleton took a deep breath. He picked up his pen. He looked at me with a newfound expression. It wasn't hate, it was respect. The respect one predator has for another. We need to structure the stock options so they vest over 5 years, he said. 3 years, I countered, and I want a seat on the board. While I was dismantling a corporate giant in the sky, my family was busy digging their own grave in the mud. My parents were desperate. The foreclosure on the villa had gone through. The bank had seized their accounts. They were staying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where you pay by the hour. But their greed was a renewable resource. They had convinced themselves that I must have the real original deed, the one that proved their ownership hidden somewhere, and they remembered that I hadn't changed the locks on my old apartment in the city, a small studio I still rented but rarely visited, at 2 p.m. Just as I was shaking hands with Pendleton, my phone buzzed with a security alert. Motion detected apartment 4B. I opened the app. The feed was crystal clear. I saw my father, wearing a hoodie that was too tight for him, using a crowbar to pry open the door of my old apartment. My mother was standing behind him, holding a flashlight and looking terrified. They broke the lock and stumbled inside. They began tearing the place apart. They ripped books off the shelves. They overturned the mattress. They were looking for a piece of paper that didn't exist, chasing a fantasy that they still owned me. Where is it? I heard my father hiss through the camera microphone. She must keep it here. She is too sentimental to throw it away. Hurry, Richard, my mother cried. Someone will hear us. I did not call out to them. I did not trigger the alarm siren. I simply pressed the button labeled Police Dispatch. I watched on the screen as the patrol car arrived 3 minutes later. I watched as the officers drew their weapons and entered the hallway. I watched my parents freeze as the police shouted for them to get on the ground. We are her parents, my father screamed as they cuffed him. We have a right to be here. This is a misunderstanding. You have a crowbar, sir, the officer said dryly. That is burglary. I turned off the phone. I looked at Pendleton. I need to make a quick stop at the precinct before we finalize the paperwork. Personal business. Of course, Pendleton said, pouring me a glass of sparkling water. Take your time. We aren't going anywhere. The interrogation room at the precinct was cold. It smelled of stale sweat and floor cleaner. My parents were sitting on metal chairs, handcuffed to the table. They looked small. They looked old. The arrogance that had defined them for my entire life had finally been stripped away, leaving only fear. When I walked in, my mother let out a sob. Gretchen, oh, thank God. Tell them it is a mistake. We were just looking for something we left behind. You broke into my home, I said. With a crowbar. That is breaking and entering, burglary, attempted theft. Given your current legal troubles with the tax fraud investigation, this will likely deny you bail. You will sit in county jail until trial. My father looked up. His face was gray. Please, Gretchen, we are your parents. You keep saying that word, I said. I do not think it means what you think it means. I sat down opposite them. I placed a document on the table. It was not a deed. It was a contract I had drafted with Mr. Thorne earlier that morning, anticipating exactly this kind of stupidity. I can drop the charges, I said. I can tell the officers that you had permission to be there, that it was just a misunderstanding about the key. Yes, please, my mother begged. But, I said, placing a pen on top of the paper, you have to sign this. My father squinted at the document. What is it? It is a quitclaim deed and a release of claims, I explained. It states that you irrevocably surrender any and all interest, rights, or claims to Lot 49. It states that you acknowledge I am the sole, rightful owner, and it states that you will never contact me, sue me, or speak about me in public again. If you violate it, the deal is void, and I will press charges for the burglary and the tax fraud immediately. My father hesitated, even now, in handcuffs. His greed flickered. But the land, Henderson said it might be worth a couple of million. If we sign this, we get nothing. I almost laughed. They were sitting there, facing prison, still trying to calculate the angle. They had no idea I had just secured a deal worth $2 billion. They thought they were signing away a scrap of land to avoid jail. You have two choices, I said. Sign the paper and walk out of here poor but free, or don't sign it, and go to prison while I sell the land anyway. The choice is yours. You have 1 minute. I checked my watch. My father looked at my mother. She nodded frantically. She didn't care about the land anymore. She just wanted to go home. Fine, my father spat. Fine, keep your trash heap. It is just a parking lot. I hope you rot in it. He grabbed the pen and signed. He pressed so hard the paper ripped slightly. My mother signed next, her hand shaking. I took the paper. I checked the signatures. They were valid. Thank you, I said. You are free to go. I knocked on the door. The officer opened it. I am declining to press charges, I told the officer. It was a family dispute. Let them go. The officer looked annoyed but nodded. He uncuffed them. My parents stood up, rubbing their wrists. They looked at me with pure venom. You think you won, my father sneered as he walked to the door. But you are alone, Gretchen. You have no family. You have a parking lot and an empty apartment. You are pathetic. Goodbye, Richard, I said. Good luck with the job hunt. They walked out of the station, heads held high in a pantomime of dignity. They walked out into the rain. Thinking they had just outsmarted me by avoiding jail, they thought they had thrown a worthless bone to a dog to save their own skins. I walked out behind them, clutching the document that secured my $2 billion empire. I watched them get into a taxi, arguing about the fare. I pulled out my phone and called Pendleton. I am on my way back, I said. The title is clear. The iron belt is secure. Let's sign the deal. Excellent, Pendleton said. Welcome to the Billionaires Club, Ms. Alderney. I hung up. I looked at the gray sky. It didn't look gloomy anymore. It looked like the color of platinum. I wasn't alone. I had the most powerful ally in the world, competence. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly light. The weight of their expectations, their cruelty, and their presence was finally gone. I had sold the past to buy the future, and the price was right. The champagne was already on ice. The ink on the final partnership agreement with Omnicorp was hypothetically drying. Even though we were still 20 minutes away from the official signing ceremony, I stood in the conference room on the 45th floor. Looking out at the city that was about to become my playground, Sterling was checking his phone, looking as close to happy as a man made of algorithms could look. Then the double doors swung open. It was not the notary. It was a man I had never seen before. He was short, sweaty, and wore a suit that was trying too hard to be expensive, but missed the mark by a margin of polyester. He was followed by 2 uniformed process servers. "Stop everything," the man announced, his voice booming with the false confidence of a bill collector. "This proceeding is halted by federal injunction." Pendleton, the Omnicorp legal shark, stood up slowly. He looked like a lion whose nap had been disturbed by a particularly noisy mouse. "Who are you?" "I am Julian Vane," the man said, slapping a thick leather folder onto the driftwood table. "I represent Sovereign Debt Acquisition Fund, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, we have filed a priority lien against all assets held by the Alderney family, including so specifically Lot 49. "That is impossible," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse began to race. I hold the title. It is in my name. My parents signed a quitclaim deed yesterday. They have no interest in this property. Julian smiled, and it was a ugly, oily thing. Ah, but that is where you are wrong, Ms. Alderney. You see, your father, Richard Alderney, signed a consolidated debt restructuring agreement 5 years ago with my client. Buried in paragraph 84, section C, is a patrimonial extension clause. It states that any asset transferred to a direct descendant within 10 years of a default is subject to immediate clawback if the primary debtor becomes insolvent. He pointed a finger at me. Your father defaulted this morning. The quitclaim deed he signed yesterday, that was a transfer of an asset while insolvent. That is fraudulent conveyance. The land does not belong to you, Gretchen. It belongs to his creditors. It belongs to us. The room went cold. Pendleton looked at the document Julian had thrown down. He read it, his face tightening. Is this valid? I asked Pendleton. It is aggressive, Pendleton admitted, his voice low. It is a predatory clause, usually thrown out in court, but until a judge rules on it, the title is clouded. We cannot close the deal. Omnicorp cannot build a billion-dollar data center on land that might be repossessed by a debt collector next week. Exactly, Julian gloated. However, my client is reasonable. We are willing to release the lien for a settlement fee, say 50% of the sale price. I looked at Julian. I looked at the smug set of his jaw. This wasn't just a vulture fund. This was personal. This was a setup. Who is your client? I asked. Sovereign Debt Acquisition Fund is a shell. Who is the principal? That is privileged information, Julian said. I will find out, I said. You have 48 hours, Pendleton said, checking his watch. The board meets on Thursday to finalize the budget. If the title is not clear by then, we trigger the Nevada contingency. I am sorry. Gretchen, I cannot risk the shareholders' money on a legal war. 48 hours, 2 days to save a $2 billion empire from being strangled by my father's incompetence. I walked out of the room, ignoring Julian's victorious grin. I grabbed Knox in the hallway. Find out who Julian Vane is, I ordered. Tear his life apart. It took Knox exactly 40 minutes. We were in the back of the town car, speeding toward my lawyer's office, when Knox turned his laptop screen toward me. Julian Vane, Knox said. Disbarred in New York for ethics violations. I moved here 2 years ago, and guess who he was dating in college? He clicked a photo. It was a younger Julian, looking equally sweaty, with his arm around a girl in a sorority sash, Tiffany. She is the client, I whispered. She bought our father's debt. Technically, Knox explained. She used the last of her crypto wallet, the little bit she hid from you and the parents, to buy the debt for pennies on the dollar from the original bank. The bank thought it was worthless paper. Tiffany knew she could use it to trigger this clause. She is trying to nuke the deal. My sister, she knew she couldn't own the land, so she decided to burn it. If she won, she would take half my fortune. If she lost, she would drag me down into bankruptcy with her. Turn the car around, I said to the driver. Where are we going? Knox asked. The Hall of Records, I said. This clause relies on one specific fact, that the land was an asset of my father's that he transferred to me, that it was a gift. Wasn't it? Knox asked. He gave you the deed at the dinner. He gave me a deed, I said, my mind racing back to that night. But he didn't sign a transfer document then. He just handed me the paper. The deed was already in my name. I assumed he had transferred it quietly beforehand to avoid taxes. But what if... I trailed off. A memory surfaced. I was 6 years old. My grandmother, Beatrice, was dying. She was the only Alderney who didn't look at me like I was a smudge on the window. She had held my hand and whispered something. I left you a place to play. Little bird, don't let them take it. I had always thought she meant her garden, but what if she meant something else? We arrived at the City Hall Hall of Records 10 minutes before closing. I didn't care. I flashed a wad of cash at the security guard, and he led us into the basement archives. It was a dungeon of paper, smelling of dust and decaying cellulose. I need the probate records from 1996, I told the clerk, a woman named Mrs. Higgins who looked like she had been part of the building's foundation. Estate of Beatrice Alderney. That is on microfiche, honey, she sighed. Row 14, for 12 hours. I sat in the flickering light of the microfiche reader. My eyes burned. My back screamed. Knox brought me coffee that tasted like battery acid. We scrolled through thousands of scanned documents. The clock was ticking. 30 hours left. 20 hours left. Gretchen, Knox said, pointing at the screen. Look at this. It was a scan of a handwritten will. My grandmother's handwriting, spidery, elegant, and firm. Item 7. To my granddaughter, Gretchen Alderney. I leave the parcel of land known as Lot 49, Industrial Sector 4. I leave this in a blind trust, to be administered by her father, Richard, until she reaches the age of 25. This property is to be kept separate from the general family estate. It is hers and hers alone, from the moment of my death. I froze. The date on the will was 1996. My father didn't own the land, I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. He never owned it. He was just the trustee. He was holding it for me, which means, Knox said, grinning, it was never his asset. And if it wasn't his asset, I continued, his debts cannot attach to it. The patrimonial extension clause is void, because there was no transfer. He didn't give me the land at that dinner. He was just handing over the paperwork for property I had legally owned since I was a child. But then the anger came, a cold, black rage that eclipsed everything I had felt before. They didn't give me a gift. They didn't even give me a bad gift. They had hidden my inheritance for 3 years after I turned 25. They had let the land rot, and when they finally gave it to me, they acted like it was an act of charity, a cruel joke. They had gaslit me into believing I should be grateful for receiving something that was already mine. They had returned my own property to me and laughed while doing it. Mrs. Higgins, I said, standing up, I need a certified copy of this, with the seal, now. It will cost you $20, she said. I will give you 1,000, I said, with the certified will in my hand. I didn't go back to Omnicorp. I went to the police station, but not to turn myself in, to file a report. Then, I went to the Omnicorp boardroom. It was Thursday morning, 2 hours before the deadline. Julian Vane was already there, sitting with his feet up on the table. Tiffany was with him. She looked haggard but triumphant. She was wearing a white suit, trying to project innocence. Time's up, sis, Tiffany sneered when I walked in. Pay up or we seize the land. Julian here has the sheriff on speed dial. Pendleton looked at me. Gretchen, do you have a solution? I do not have a solution, I said, placing the certified will on the table. I have a revelation. I slid the document toward Pendleton. He put on his glasses. He read it. His eyebrows shot up. He read it again. Then, he started to laugh. It was a dry, terrifying chuckle. What? Julian demanded, taking his feet off the table. What is that? This, Pendleton said, is a copy of the last will and testament of Beatrice Alderney. It establishes that Lot 49 has been the sole property of Gretchen Alderney since 1996. It was held in trust. Pendleton looked at Julian with eyes like flint. You cannot place a lien on an asset the debtor never owned. Mr. Vane, your client's claim is based on the premise that Richard transferred the land to Gretchen. He did not. The trust dissolved automatically upon her 25th birthday. The title transfer was a formality, not a conveyance of value. Julian snatched the paper. His hands were shaking. This is obscure probate law. We will fight this. We will argue that the trust was intermingled. No, you won't, I said. Because I just came from the district attorney's office. Tiffany went pale. What? I filed a criminal complaint, I said calmly. Against both of you. You see, Tiffany, when you bought that debt, you signed an affidavit stating you had no insider knowledge of the assets. But you did. You knew about the trust. You knew because Grandma told us both about her will when we were kids. I forgot. You didn't. I bluffed. I didn't know if she remembered, but the look of terror on her face told me I was right. And you? Julian. I turned to the lawyer. You filed a lien knowing it was fraudulent. That is malicious abuse of process. And since you used interstate electronic communications to file it, that is wire fraud. The FBI is very interested in disbarred lawyers who commit wire fraud. You are lying, Julian stammered, backing away. Check your email, I said. Julian pulled out his phone. He turned white. It is a subpoena. I suggest you run, I said. Although, with the federal investigation pending, I doubt you will get far. Julian didn't wait. He dropped his briefcase and bolted for the door. Leaving Tiffany alone at the table, Tiffany looked at me. Her lip quivered. The bravado was gone. The white suit looked like a costume. Gretchen, she whispered. I just wanted my share. Grandma loved me too. Grandma left you the jewelry, I said. The diamonds, the pearls. You sold them all 5 years ago to fund your trip to Ibiza. Remember? Tiffany flinched. You got your inheritance. Tiffany, I said, stepping closer to her. You spent yours. I built an empire on mine. We are not the same. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time. Don't send me to jail. I can't go to jail. I am too pretty for jail. Then you better hope the judge likes your Instagram feed, I said. I turned to Pendleton. Is the title clear? Crystal, Pendleton said, looking at me with something approaching awe. The lien is void ab initio. We can sign. Good, I said. 2 uniformed officers entered the room. They had been waiting in the hallway, at my request. Tiffany Alderney, one officer asked. No, Tiffany screamed, backing into the glass wall. Gretchen, help me. We are sisters. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had laughed when our parents threw a rusty key at my face. I looked at the woman who had tried to steal the one thing I had built with my own hands. I have no sister, I said. I only have a plaintiff. The officers took her arms. She screamed all the way to the elevator. The sound echoed down the hallway. A high-pitched wail of entitlement meeting reality. I sat down at the driftwood table. I smoothed out the wrinkles in my field jacket. Where is the pen? I asked Pendleton. He handed me a heavy gold fountain pen. Let's make $2 billion, I said. I signed my name. The ink was black and permanent, just like my resolve. The shadow war was over. I had dragged the truth into the light, and it had burned them all to ash. Now, there was nothing left to do but build. The signing ceremony was not held in a boardroom. I insisted on that. It was held on the very asphalt where I had once picked up used needles and dodged rats. But Lot 49 looked different tonight. Omnicorp had transformed the industrial wasteland into a stage worthy of the Oscars. A massive pavilion of glass and steel had been erected overnight. Covering the central junction point, a red carpet, the color of fresh arterial blood, ran from the main gate now guarded by a phalanx of private security and tactical gear all the way to the raised platform where the contracts lay waiting. I stood backstage, adjusting the cuffs of my white silk suit. I had retired the charcoal blazer. That belonged to the engineer who was fighting to survive. The woman in the mirror today was the architect of a new era. 5 minutes to air, Ms. Alderney, a production assistant whispered, tapping her headset. We are live on every major network, CNBC, Bloomberg, BBC. The world is watching. Let them watch, I said. I walked out. The applause was a physical force, a wall of sound that hit me in the chest. 300 guest tech moguls, city officials, investors, and the logistics partners who had stuck by me rose to their feet. But I didn't look at them. I looked at the camera lenses, the black eyes of the world, transmitting my image at the speed of light. At the podium, Arthur Pendleton stood next to the CEO of Omnicorp. A man named Silas Vance. Silas took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Silas's voice boomed across the lot and through the fiber optic cables beneath our feet. "We are here to announce not just a partnership, but a revolution. Project Cortex has found its home, and we have found our partner." He gestured to me. I stepped forward. "The deal we are signing today," Silas continued, his voice dropping to a reverent hush, "is the largest single land acquisition and infrastructure partnership in the history of the Pacific Northwest, including the valuation of the air rights, the data easements, and the equity stake in the Cortex AI subsidiary. The total value of this transaction is $2.1 billion. The number flashed on the giant LED screens behind us. $2.1 billion. The crowd gasped. It was a number so large it felt abstract, but to me, it was very concrete. It was the weight of every insult, every sneer, every moment of neglect I had endured, converted into currency 5 miles away, in a cramped, mildew-scented room at the Blue Heron Motel. That number hit with the force of a bomb. My family was huddled around a television set that was bolted to the dresser. They were not living in luxury anymore, after my parents had signed the quitclaim deed to avoid jail, and after Tiffany had managed to secure a bail bondsman by pawning her last hidden Rolex. They had retreated here. They were waiting for the big payout. They still deluded themselves into thinking they could get by suing me later, or perhaps by selling their story to a tabloid. They were eating takeout noodles from styrofoam cups. My father was complaining about the draft from the window. Tiffany was picking at her chipped nail polish, muttering about how unfair the holding cell had been. Then, they heard it. $2.1 billion. My father dropped his fork. It clattered onto the linoleum floor, a tiny sound in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. He stared at the screen. He stared at my face, high definition and glowing with triumph. He stared at the number. "Billion?" he whispered. His voice cracked. "With a B." "That is impossible," my mother breathed. Clutching her throat, her face went ashen, the color draining away until she looked like a wax figure. "It was a parking lot. It was trash. We gave her trash." $2 billion, Tiffany shrieked. It wasn't a word. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. She scrambled off the bed and fell to her knees in front of the TV, clawing at the screen as if she could reach through and grab the money. "That is my money. That is my inheritance. She stole it. She knew that witch knew the whole time." My father stood up. His left arm began to twitch. He grabbed his chest, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "I had the deed," he stammered, his eyes bulging. "I held it in my hand. I threw it at her. I threw $2 billion at her like it was garbage." The realization wasn't just mental. It was physiological. The sheer magnitude of his loss, the crushing weight of his own stupidity, physically struck him. He collapsed back onto the bed, gasping for air, clutching his heart. "Richard," my mother screamed, fanning him with a takeout menu. "Breathe. Oh my God. Don't die now. We have to get there." "The car," my father wheezed, struggling to stand up despite the pain radiating down his arm. "Get the rental. We have to go. Now." "We can't," Tiffany cried, looking at her reflection in the dark TV screen as the camera cut away to a commercial. "I am on bail. I have an ankle monitor if I leave the zone." "Forget the monitor," my father roared, a surge of adrenaline overriding his failing heart. "Do you understand what we just saw? She is a billionaire. She is our daughter. We are her family. She can't keep this from us. If we make a scene, if the cameras see us, she will have to pay us off to make us go away. Even 1%, just 1%, is $20 million. The math galvanized them. Greed, it turned out, was a stronger drug than survival. They scrambled out of the motel room, leaving the door wide open. They piled into the dented beige sedan they had rented. My father drove like a madman, running red lights, his face slick with sweat, his eyes fixed on the distant glow of the floodlights over Lot 49. Back at the ceremony, the atmosphere was electric. I had just signed the first document. The flashbulbs were blinding. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Silas. "You look like you were born for this," he said. "I was forged for this," I corrected him. Suddenly, a commotion rippled through the back of the crowd. It started as a murmur, then grew into shouting. The security perimeter, usually impenetrable, was being tested. I looked up from the table. The giant screens that were broadcasting the event to the world switched feeds to a camera near the entrance, likely expecting to catch the arrival of another dignitary. Instead, the screens showed a scene of chaos. 3 people were trying to shove their way past the armed guards. They looked deranged. My father was wearing a suit jacket that was 2 sizes too big, his shirt unbuttoned, his face purple with exertion. My mother was missing a shoe. Hobbling on one heel, Tiffany was screaming, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "Let us through," my father bellowed, shoving a security guard who didn't budge an inch. "I am Richard Alderney. That is my daughter. I demand to see her." "We are family," my mother shrieked, waving her arms. "Gretchen, Gretchen, baby, it is Mommy. We are here to celebrate with you." "Tell them who we are," Tiffany yelled at the camera, her face contorted into a mask of desperate entitlement. "Gretchen, tell them to let us in. We love you. We have always loved you." The crowd at the pavilion fell silent. The juxtaposition was jarring. Here was the elite of the tech world, sipping champagne, and on the screen was a trio of banshees clawing at the gates of paradise. Silas looked at me, concerned. "Do you want me to cut the feed? We can have them removed." I looked at the screen. I saw the fear in their eyes. Not fear for me, but fear of poverty. I saw the hunger. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to feed. "No," I said. My voice was amplified by the microphone, echoing across the silent crowd. "Do not cut the feed. Let them through the first barrier. Bring them to the edge of the carpet." "Are you sure?" Silas asked. "Absolutely," I said. I signaled to the head of security, who was listening in his earpiece. The guards at the gate stepped back. My family, thinking they had won, stumbled forward. They saw me standing on the raised platform, bathed in light, 100 yards away. They started running. It was a pathetic, loping run, my father clutching his chest, my mother limping, Tiffany sprinting with the desperation of a cornered animal. They reached the edge of the red carpet, where a second line of security stopped them cold. They stood there, panting, looking up at me. The cameras swiveled. Every lens was now focused on the reunion. "Gretchen!" my father called out, his voice cracking. He tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. "We saw the news. We are so proud. We knew you could do it. We just wanted to be here to share this moment. We forgive you," my mother sobbed, clasping her hands together. "We forgive you for everything. Just let us come up there. We are a family. You can't do this alone." Tiffany tried to smooth her hair, looking frantically at the press. "We are the Alderneys. We are a team, Gretchen. Tell them we are partners." I stood still. I let the silence stretch. I let the world look at them disheveled, frantic, oozing greed from every pore. And then I let the world look at me calm, powerful, unshakable. I lifted the microphone. "Security," I said. My voice was cool, clear, and devoid of any emotion. "Hold them there." My father's smile faltered. "Gretchen, what are you doing?" "It is Daddy." "I have a statement to make," I said, addressing the cameras, but looking directly into my father's eyes. "Tonight is about value," I began. "We have assigned a value to this land, $2 billion. It is valuable because it is stable, because it is essential, because it has a future." I paused. I pointed a finger at the 3 people shivering at the edge of the carpet. "But there are things that have no value, things that are depreciated assets, liabilities." Gretchen, don't, Tiffany whispered, sensing the axe falling. These people claiming to be my family, I continued, my voice hardening into steel. They are mistaken. My family died a long time ago. They died the day they laughed at a girl for being poor. They died the day they tried to steal her work. They died the day they sold her safety for a handbag. The crowd murmured. The shock was palpable. You stand there, I said, my voice rising, filling the night air. And you scream about blood. You scream about love. But I see no love. I see 3 strangers who are looking at a bank account, not a daughter. That is not true, my mother wailed. We love you. You love the money, I shouted back, losing my cool for the first time, letting the righteous anger flood out. You love the $2 billion if I had failed. If I was sleeping in a tent on this lot like you told me to, would you be here? Would you be running to hug me? Silence. The truth hung in the air. Undeniable. They didn't answer. They couldn't. I thought so, I said, regaining my composure. You threw me away. You gave me an empty parking lot and wished me luck in hell. Well, look around you. I spread my arms, encompassing the lights, the tower, the power. I paved hell, and I own it now. I looked at the head of security. These people are trespassing, I said. They are not on the guest list. And frankly, they are lowering the property value. Remove them. No, my father screamed as the guards moved in. You can't do this. I am your father. I made you. You made nothing, I said. I made myself. The guards grabbed them. It wasn't gentle. They were dragged backward, away from the light, away from the gold, back toward the darkness of the street. Gretchen, Tiffany screamed, kicking and flailing, her shoe flying off and landing on the pristine red carpet. Please, just $1 million, just $500,000, anything. My mother collapsed, dead weight in the guard's arms, wailing like a banshee. My father was clutching his chest, shouting obscenities, cursing the day I was born. The cameras captured every second of it. The image of the Alderney family, once the pillars of local society being dragged through the mud, screaming for money, became an instant icon of their downfall. It was ugly, it was raw, and it was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. I watched until they were thrown out of the main gate. I watched until the gate clicked shut and locked. I turned back to the crowd. They were silent, staring at me with a mix of fear and awe. I adjusted my microphone. Now, I said, a small, genuine smile playing on my lips. Where were we? I believe I have a champagne bottle to open. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous. It was the sound of the world acknowledging that the victim had not just survived, she had become the conqueror. I looked up at the night sky, past the floodlights. I thought of the junction box buried deep beneath my feet. I thought of my grandmother. I didn't let them take it. Grandma. I took everything. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I drank it. It tasted like cold stars and absolute victory. Time is the ultimate architect. It dismantles the weak and fortifies the strong. 1 year has passed since I stood on the asphalt and watched my family being dragged away. In that year, the landscape of Seattle has changed. The skyline has a new peak. The Alderney Omni Tower rises 80 stories into the clouds, a monolith of black glass and steel that seems to drink the light. It is not just a building, it is a machine. Inside, the cortex AI hums with the collective intelligence of the planet, routing global supply chains with an efficiency that has saved the industry billions. And at the very top, in a corner office that floats above the fog, sits the executive vice president, me. I walked into my office at 8 in the morning. My shoes clicked on the polished concrete floor, a deliberate design choice, a reminder of where I came from. I didn't need a view of the ocean. I needed a view of the port. From my desk, I could see the ships docking, the cranes moving like giant insects, and the steady stream of trucks flowing into the logistics hub at the base of the tower. Secure Transit Hub 49 was still there. It was cleaner now, automated, and ran with Swiss precision. But I had kept the name, I had kept the soul. My assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, walked in. "The press is ready for the ribbon cutting at the Malibu site," he said, handing me a tablet. "Good," I said. "Is the signage up?" "Yes, ma'am." "The Beatrice Alderney Center for Displaced Youth." I smiled. It was the final nail in the coffin of the old legacy. 6 months ago, the Sapphire Coast Villa, the place where Tiffany had hosted her white parties. The place my parents had leveraged into oblivion, went up for auction. I bought it. I paid cash. I didn't even visit it. I gutted it. I tore out the marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the vanity. I turned the wine cellar into a library. I turned the ballroom into a dormitory. I turned the pool house into a counseling center. It was no longer a monument to vanity. It was a sanctuary for kids who had been thrown away by their families. Just like I was. "The press release is already trending," Leo added. "They love the angle. Billionaire turns family estate into shelter." "It is poetic justice," I said. "Prepare the car. I have one stop to make before the board meeting." I took the elevator down to the private garage. My car was waiting. It was not a sensible sedan anymore. It was a hypercar, electric, silent, and terrifyingly fast. I drove it myself. I needed to feel the road. I drove south, away from the glass towers, away from the money, into the gray sprawl of the industrial outskirts. I passed the old warehouses, the rust, the decay. I drove until I reached the Blue Heron Motel. It was even worse than I remembered. The neon sign was broken, flickering like a dying pulse. The parking lot was full of potholes. I pulled up to the front office. I didn't park. I just idled. The car's presence looking like a spaceship that had landed in a swamp. I saw them through the window of the laundry room. My father was there. He was wearing a stained undershirt, his once manicured hands red and raw as he folded towels. He looked 20 years older. The arrogance had been hollowed out of him, leaving a shell of a man who jumped at shadows. My mother was pushing a maid's cart across the lot. She looked frail. She was arguing with a guest about a missing bar of soap. The guest yelled at her. She flinched. She didn't fight back. She just bowed her head. And then there was Tiffany. She was scrubbing the pavement near the ice machine with a stiff brush. Her hair was frizzy, tied back with a rubber band. She wore a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. She looked up and saw the car. For a moment, she just stared. Then, recognition dawned. She dropped the brush. She ran. She ran toward my car, waving her hands, her face lighting up with a desperate, pathetic hope. My parents saw her running and followed, shuffling toward me like moths to a flame. I lowered the window. The air conditioning of the car battled the humid, stale air of the motel lot. "Gretchen!" Tiffany gasped, grabbing the door handle. It was locked. "Oh my God. You came. I knew you would come. Look at you. This car is the new model. It is gorgeous." She pressed her face against the glass. "Please, Gretchen, you have to get us out of here. It is hell. We are making minimum wage. The manager steals our tips. Daddy's back is giving out. Mom can barely walk." My father arrived, panting. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flash of the old entitlement, but it was quickly extinguished by his reality. He looked down at his shoes. He couldn't meet my eyes. "We are suffering. Gretchen," my mother whimpered. "We have learned our lesson. Truly, we are humble now. Just give us a small apartment, a job, anything. We will clean your toilets. We will answer your phones. Just don't leave us here." Tiffany nodded frantically. "Yes, I will do anything I can, be your assistant. I can run your social media. I am good at that. Remember, please, sis, I am begging you." I looked at them. I looked for the anger that had fueled me for so long. I looked for the hate. But it was gone, burned away by success. In its place was something colder, emptier, indifference. They weren't monsters anymore. They were just sad. Small people who had bet against the wrong horse. I do not hire people without qualifications, I said, my voice smooth and calm. And your track record is poor. But we are family, Tiffany wailed, the old refrain coming out instinctively. No, I said. You are former business partners who breached contract. That is a liability I cannot afford. Tiffany's face crumbled. My father let out a low groan. However, I continued, checking my watch, I did hear a rumor. There is a scrapyard down in the South District, the one near the sewage plant. They are looking for night security. It pays cash. You might fit in there. Tiffany recoiled, as if I had slapped her. Security. At a dump, I am an Alderney. Not anymore, I said. Now, you are just staff. I looked at my father. Goodbye, Richard. Try not to fold the towels wrong. I hear they deduct it from your pay. I pressed the button. The window rolled up, sealing me back inside my silent, climate-controlled bubble. Gretchen, no, wait, Tiffany screamed, pounding on the glass. I didn't look back. I engaged the engine. The car surged forward, leaving them behind in a cloud of dust and exhaust. I watched them in the rearview mirror for a fleeting second, 3 small figures shrinking into the distance, trapped in the prison of their own making. Then I turned the corner, and they were gone. I drove back to the tower. I took the private elevator to the roof. The wind was strong up here, 80 stories above the earth. The city of Seattle lay spread out below me like a circuit board of light. To the west, the ocean was a vast, dark expanse. To the east, the mountains stood guard, and right below me, the trucks were moving, thousands of them, carrying the lifeblood of the economy, guided by the systems I had built. I walked to the edge of the parapet. I placed my hands on the cold railing. I had won. I had not just survived the fire, I had become the flame. I had taken the rust and the dirt and the neglect, and I had turned it into gold. I thought about the rusty key hitting my face. I thought about the laughter. I thought about the loneliness. It didn't hurt anymore. It was just fuel. I looked down at the city lights, blurring slightly as the wind whipped my hair. They threw me in the mud, I whispered to the wind, my voice carried away into the night. But they forgot that a seed only grows when it is buried in the dirt. I turned around and walked back toward the door. The boardroom was waiting. The next deal was waiting. The world was waiting, and I was just getting started. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the ride as much as I enjoyed telling it. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Do not forget to subscribe to the BitterSweet Drama Stories channel. Like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.